Which screen am I sharing? Cool. Can you guys see my PowerPoint presentation?
Yep.
Yes, thanks. Yeah.
Awesome. Great. So today I thought it would be fun to have a look at the esquisse package. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, despite giving me some pointers literally 5 minutes ago. But yeah, so that's what we're going to do today. So what is this package? It's in French, or the package is a French package, which translates to sketch, which I think is based on the idea of you being able to sort of play around with your data visualizations. And it's basically a package that allows you to interactively explore your data with using sort of ggplot visualizations, but in a user-friendly way where you can sort of drag and drop your variables and also easily edit graph labels and things like that. And one of the benefits of it is that you can also, as you're sort of making your graph, it produces some R code, and you can directly insert that into your script so that you can reproduce that graph anytime without having to go back into the package. But also, I found for myself, when I was getting back into data and stats at the start of my PhD, that it was quite useful for sort of helping me get used to different ggplot sort of terminology and identifying how certain aspects should or could be edited to make visual changes. So as I mentioned, it uses the ggplot sort of interface or aesthetics, and this is just a very quick example of a graph using some random data. And ggplot is based off the idea of the grammar of graphics, which I believe is what the GG in front of ggplot stands for. And the grammar of graphics is basically a framework that helps provide a layered approach. That is not how you spell describe, but basically so you can describe and construct your visualizations. And so this is sort of just a quick diagram to sort of explain the idea of the layers in ggplot. So you'd sort of start with your data to define the parameters of your graph, and then you can sort of edit the aesthetics to look at different axes, plot positions, or using different colors, etc. And then you've got things like your scale, geometric objects, and that's looking at whether it's like a line or a bar plot or something to that effect. And then you can also add statistics that can be calculated sort of in ggplot as well, or you can create subplots using facets, and you can also specify the coordinate system that you would like to use. So there's a lot of options for ggplot, as you can see from this very, very long list that doesn't ever seem to end, which is one of the reasons why I found this esquisse package to be quite useful for when I was getting back into graphing. So that was a very quick introduction to this package, but now we're going to hop on over to R, which is not open, so that we can have a play with the actual package. And that opened in the wrong thing, so let's open that in RStudio. Excellent. Okay, so first of all, when you want to use a squidgy, you need to load the library. So I'm just going to do that really quickly. And then for this example, I also decided I was going to play around with the Palmer penguins data. So I'm just going to load that library and assign that data to a data set called data. So if we have a quick look at that data, you can see we have a range of variables, from factor variables through to numerical variables. and integer variables. So how do we play with this data in the esquisse package? So there's two ways that you can launch this app. I'll show you both of them. So the first way, you just put, I don't know how you would pronounce this, but basically it's esquisse with an R on the end. And you can just run it without any sort of thing in between the brackets, and it will bring up this screen, which will hopefully finish loading in a moment.
It's very French then, isn't it?
Yes, it's very
French.
Yes, I did Google Translate that earlier. Something about looking at the sky at night and stars and laughing, and by looking at the stars laughing, it means you're also laughing. Something to that effect. But yeah,
something like that,
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is one way you can get your data into this sort of application, and it's picking up here that I already have a data frame in RStudio, so I could import that from there, but you can also sort of, if you have a CSV file or anything else that maybe isn't already in R, you can import that as well. You can also view your data. It's unfortunately not very high contrast. It's very, very pale gray on this white background, but it does sort of give you a bit of information about all of your variables. And you can also, in theory, update your data set if you wanted to convert variables or change the names or something. And basically, if you import that data, this is what it looks like. But before I get to that, I'm going to actually leave again and show you the second way, which is basically using the esquisse and then just having your data set in between the brackets. And that will, again, load it, hopefully. We shall see. Oh, wait. There we go. It helps to run the right bit of code. And so then when this loads, it automatically has your variables there ready to go. So now that we have this, what you can see here is up here we have a toolbar where you can see that you can import data. You can also look at your data, again, very low contrast. And you also have some options to update and select your variables, add columns. So you could, in theory, do a calculation and create a column there. And you can also update the factor level, so reorder them, or actually change a numeric variable into a factor, which is potentially fun and useful. And then we have our main sort of graphing area, and we have our list of variables, and then we have these other boxes at the bottom, and this is basically where you can drag and drop your variables to say where you want them in the graph. So for example, if I just wanted to do a histogram, let's look at body mass, I can drop that into the X section, and it will bring up this ggplot histogram of body mass. And you'll see up here that this has changed from auto to histogram. So it can detect what sort of data you're using and then suggest the best sort of visualization for that. And it does have a range of different types of visualizations, but it tends to only let you select ones that in theory would be suitable for your data. So you could change it to something like density, but it won't let you change it to a point graph. So I'll just pop back over to the histogram. What I'll also then show you is that we have this additional sort of toolbar down here. And this is sort of where you could start playing around with how your graph looks a little bit. So here you could change the width and the height, but I'm just going to leave it as it is for now. But here is a super easy way to change your labels. So whether that be a title, I'm going to call it Penguins Are Cool, which is really not data science friendly or good practice, but we'll roll with that for now. And then you can also change your axis labels. So we'll just change this one to body mass, and this can change to count for now. And I don't know if you can actually see, but it has actually changed at the bottom. And when you click on these pluses, it brings up the option so you can actually change information about the font. So for your viewing ease, I will just increase that a little bit, and I'll make it bold. So you can see that has now gone to a larger font size and is also bold. And I'll also just quickly do that for the y-axis as well. Okay, so that's sort of the labels and the titles, and obviously you can add a subtitle. Maybe I'll just change this to, and we'll put it in the center. And then you can also add caption as well if you wanted to, but I won't do that today. Then we have an axes option, and this is where you can change the font of your actual axes values. So I'm going to make them a bit bigger again, so you can see them a bit better. And so that's sort of how you can change your the font and the text of your graph. But you also have the option for different coordinate systems. So you could flip it, which would change the axes round. In theory, you could have a fixed one, but that requires additional stuff and doesn't look very good normally. Or you could change it to a polar coordinate system, which makes a fun spiral. But probably chances are we'll just be leaving it as a Cartesian coordinate system. But there is also the ability to add a transformation to your data on your x-axis if needs be. So you could log it. So you can get an idea of whether, like, what transformations might be useful if your data isn't fitting a Gaussian distribution and you're trying to transform it so that it can sort of help. But now, obviously, when you do look at sort of assumptions, that is based on your residuals rather than your raw data, but that's just to give you an idea. So I'll just put that back. And then we have geometries, and here this will change depending on which sort of geom you're using. So as we're using the histogram at the moment, we can change the number of bins just by using the slider. We can also change the color that we're using for our histogram. And we also have the option to change our theme. So I might just change this to black and white theme, and you can see it sort of brings up the border around the edge. And we currently don't have a legend, but if you were to have a legend, you could choose where you wanted it to be and how you wanted it justified. And you can also edit text and title options in here as well. Then we have the data section, and this is where you can sort of see all of your variables, and you can sort of edit what data you're including. So for example, I might decide that I don't want to include any data where it's not applicable. So I could turn all of those off so that they're not included. Or if I only wanted to look at one group of penguin species, I could also remove them. But they're also super easy to just add back in. And then lastly, down here, we have this code section. And this is where it produces all of the code that you would in theory need to be able to produce the graph that you have made in this app. without actually having to then go back into the app anytime you wanted to recreate the graph. And at the top here, I don't know if you can really see, but this is a bit of data wrangling. So where I went into the data tab and I removed the NAs from my variables, that's what that bit of code is doing before it actually moves into the ggplot graph section. But you can then click this little button down here, and that will insert the code into your script. So if I just leave that a second, you can see that it's produced it here. And if I just load these two libraries that it very conveniently also included when I inserted the script, then I can just make the graph really quickly without having to go back into the esquisse package. But we'll have a little bit of a play with some other sort of data types just so you guys can see. So I'll just let that load again. So if I was interested in whether there was a relationship between body mass and flipper length, I could add them to X and Y as so. And you can sort of see, again, that it's plotted things. I'm going to quickly run back through these and just make everything a little bit bigger for you all. I can't remember where everything is. Cool. And then, so that's a very basic point graph at the moment. And you can see here it's gone to point at the top. And again, it sort of gives you other options such as jitter, which just offsets data points ever so slightly in case there's some overlapping data points. But we'll just stick with point for now. And what you can do is you can sort of, if you wanted to see whether this relationship varies depending on what species of penguins, you could in theory drop species into color, and then you could see which data points were relating to which species. And now we've got our legend, so you can jump back into the labels and title area, and you can change the legend label there. And then if we jump back into theme, you can sort of try it at different locations, just kind of like that. Or for whatever reason you decided you didn't want a legend, you could get rid of it, but in this case we'll keep it. And then you can also choose where you want it positioned, but we'll keep it in the middle for now. So what I found quite useful with this was that I could, had I not included species, what I could do is I could have inserted this code into my script. And then if I was a little unsure as to how I would actually code it to get it to show the different colors for the different species, I could sort of drag and drop that in and then go back to the code and insert that into my script. And then later on, I could compare and see which lines of code had changed, and I could sort of take that on to sort of understand how I would go about changing it myself in the future. Because I know when I started my PhD, my supervisors gave me some code for ggplot, and whilst it produced a very nice graph, I didn't fully understand what every line of code was doing at the time. And so it was actually quite difficult to edit it and it to actually work. So then there is also the option of faceting. So you could facet your graphs as well, which basically creates some subplots. I might also keep the colors. And we will also just put this one. So you can see the differences there, and it could actually be quite interesting to sort of play around with some of your variables. So you could maybe color it by sex instead, whilst also faceting for species, so that you can see if there's a relationship, say, between sex and body mass, flipper length, depending on species. There is also this little option up here, and up here is you can sort of add in some other options that you might want to include. So you could use a facet row and facet column. And with this, what you could do is you could drag like so, and what you'll get is your graph faceted by sex and species. And what it does allow you to do is also sort of come and play around with the facet. So you could it's probably not going to work with a double facet, but if I go back to a single faceted thing, you can sort of say, oh, actually, I only want 2 columns, or I want 1 column, and it will edit itself accordingly. Then what you can also do is it has this download button here where you can choose to download your figure, and you can save it to your files if you'd like. And that's a very brief sort of overview of this application. What I have noticed since I last used it is that it has updated, and it does have these tabs up here, but I did have a play around with them earlier, and I couldn't quite figure out how they work, because it gave me the impression that you could, in theory, create another graph without leaving the application, but when I tried to do that, it didn't work. So that is something that will have to be explored a little bit, I think. But it's still potentially useful. So yeah, then you can see here where I imported the code from those 2 different ggplots, and you can see that this line was added because I changed it to be colored by species, instead of having a color specified in my geom point line of code. So you can just sort of see them quite quickly. And yeah, that is a very speedy introduction to esquisse. So you can also open it in 3 sort of different locations. So there's opening it in the dialog window, which is what I just showed you. But you can also have it open in your viewer pane in RStudio. So if I were to just run that for you, you can see that it opens up here and works pretty much exactly the same. And then you can also potentially see your code straight away, and that might be more useful than doing it in the default dialog window, which you then can't really see your code or edit your code without exiting the application. And then finally, you can also get it to open up in your web browser. Stop it running in that one first, otherwise it'll complain. So that's what it looks like when it's opened in your web browser, which might be more or less useful depending on sort of how much data you have and whether you want a slightly bigger screen area to be able to view your graphs on.
Presume that will also allow, if you've got 2 screens, you would look at code in one screen and graphics in the other.
Yeah.
So
yes.
Quicker relationship between the 2.
Yeah. So yeah, And then obviously you can just, I think you might have to close the screen rather than actually just clicking that. But yeah, that is pretty much all I have to say about this package, really. But yeah, I found it useful when I was learning ggplot, and I thought that it might be useful for some people who haven't quite got into ggplot yet, or just people that wanted to make some fun explanatory ggplots without having to type out all the code. So yeah, that's all I have. So it was a bit of a quick session today, but if anyone has any questions, I will do my best to answer them.
A main use, I think, for me will be that rather than having to scurry off onto Google and things and find out the exact syntax of each line, you can just concentrate on the main job, which is setting up the graph and working out what it means and finding the best way to demonstrate what you want to show.
Yeah, that's what I found it really useful for, because I also found sometimes, especially when I was first sort of getting back into R and everything, that documentation wasn't always clear, and sometimes the examples that they give you in the documentation doesn't really cover what you're actually trying to achieve, and sometimes it can be difficult to find actual examples of what you want. And so this was sort of a fun way to quickly find that information out without having to get distracted by going onto Google in the first place. I don't know if you can add in 2 data sets simultaneously, which could be interesting, but I haven't tried that.
Any sides to it?
I mean, I think
scramble Claire's computer or anything.
I don't think so. I've used this many a time and it hasn't caused my computer to cry or have a breakdown. So hopefully it'll be fine. I think I have had difficulties before after I've updated R or RStudio, or when certain packages have updated and other packages haven't updated, that fun situation. And then I did go for a brief period where I can get it to work properly. But I think that was probably more of a user error than an issue with the actual program. I'm also not entirely sure whether you could do particularly complex data visualizations in it. So for example, like during my PhD, I would generally plot my raw data, but then also produce a separate data set of the model predicted data that I would use to sort of add the prediction line with confidence intervals to my plots. And I'm not sure whether or not you would be able to do that in this sort of app programming package. That's something to explore, I suppose. Cool. So if anyone doesn't have any questions or comments or thoughts, that's pretty much all I have for you guys. So other than also subtly reminding people that if they want to volunteer, they can, and just let me know, and I will add you to the schedule. That's pretty much everything I have. So, yeah.
Thanks, Megan. Looks great. I like it.
Yeah, I'll be useful. Thank you very much for that.
Mm-hmm.
No worries.
Yeah, I agree that not having to Google and having to try and find out how do I make the font this big and how do I change the position of the legend, at least it's all there, and then you can just look at the code and learn from it. It's great.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. That's that you can. It's the crucial thing that you can finally download the code if you want to apply it programmatically. For example, in an automated setting, which is the actual advantage over things like Excel, where you can also do some things interactively. But of course, this is much better.
Yeah.
So thank you for the presentation. That's great.
You're very welcome.
Mhm.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Hopefully there will be a session next week. Haven't currently got anything in the schedule planned, but I will work on that, and I will drop another email next week to let you know what's happening. And I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day.
And I'd also ask, is Joe's
yeah.
presentation uploaded? Did you record that one?
I did record it. I think I've added it to the website. Let me just have a look.
Just trying to have a look. Couldn't get to the right place.
So if you come onto the
oh yeah, there we are. Yeah.
website, it's currently on the SharePoint Microsoft Stream system, because I don't have access to the Harper YouTube to upload it to the YouTube, or have the ability to actually download it from this stream system either. But it is there.
So how did we get at that then, Megan?
So if you go into the chat where I've dropped the link to the, I'll just drop it again. So that's the Harrig website. So if you go to that link, hopefully you will see what I'm looking at right now. And then you just scroll down to the meeting topics, and where there's this little
that's
play
what that means.
symbol. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah. And you just click on that and it'll take you there.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah. And I think all of the stuff for Joe's thing is also in the zip folder as well. So.
Yeah, the materials were in the zip folder, but I couldn't. I thought I needed the recording as well to make sense of it.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, sorry, Joe. I was halfway up a ladder last Thursday.
Awesome. Well, yes, so I hope you all have a good evening, and I will hopefully see you next week.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Megan.
Thank you.
Many thanks.
See ya.
Bye for now.
Bye.